So to begin with, here's an overview that shows you all the individual components that are used to make the M20 Fragmentation Grenade. I model all of my components using SolidWorks, and I do that so that I have step files to use when I 3D print as opposed to STL files. You're going to get much smoother geometry when you do that. And everything here, wherever it's going to be visible, has been primed, painted, and clear coated because you don't want things to, like the paint to wear off easily. So for example, if I take apart, you can see on the bottom it's just the generic color because it's not going to be seen on that side once it's installed. So there's certain details about the way this grenade is illustrated in Apex Legends that is a little bit different than how grenades would typically be made currently. Of course, they're several hundred years in the future, so that's great that they've innovated grenades. A current generation grenade is usually a cast part that basically breaks apart once the explosive inside is detonated. And that's where you get what's called the fragments. The other kind is like a baseball grenade where the metal itself, the shell casing, fragments, and again, that's where you get that part from. In Apex Legends, it's a little bit different because the way it's illustrated, it would appear that these individual elements are what fragment out. And when it's on, they're lit up with individual lights. And so there's a couple of features I really want to make sure I captured were not only the fragments and that piece of it, but they've got this little kind of a silver color around the perimeter, and I really like that feature. So when I paint things, one of my general rules is I try to paint things in only one color. And I know that sounds like I'm not a good painter, and maybe that is the problem. But when I airbrush, I really want high consistency, and I want to be able to do the parts fast, well, and repeatably, because I want them to turn out kind of the same. So in this case, here's the other thing I find when I design something. I find that if you want to make something look like it's made out of a lot of different pieces, the best way to do that is to make it out of a lot of different pieces. When people do there's some people like on Etsy, they do the most amazing paint jobs ever, and I love their work. But unless your paint job is extremely good, you're going to see where they didn't quite catch the details, for example, when they masked or something like that. So I really want that individual look. The other thing I go for is making sure I use hardware in places where it makes sense. So for example, they have these very distinctive little features. And you could easily build this into the 3D model and mold it. But the two problems I would see are, one, painting it very clearly so that it doesn't overlap with the body color. And the other is it's going to have, you see how it has a different reflectivity to it because it is a metal part that I've put in there. And in this case, I use what's called an upholstery nail. And that's a pretty simple way to do it. But I really like how that came out and how sharp those look. So I had seen, a grenade like this that somebody had posted on Reddit, and it looked pretty neat. But it looked like typically what people do, if they have any lighting on these, is they put a single light in the center, and then these are just hollow. And when you see the grenade in-game, it's clearly not a light that's emitting out of the center of the body of the grenade. They are individual lights. And so I understand that's a lot more work, and maybe I'm not a genius with electricity here, but I wanted to have individual LED lights, and as you can see, I needed two different sizes because these fragments are smaller and have a smaller LED. So that's something I built into this. And so when I planned for the assembly, what I wanted to do was make sure that the LEDs first went in and were seated in the body of the grenade. And then once I put the fragment in over it, it pins it in place very nicely. So to start with, I'm just going to take these individual fragments, the inserts, and these are all press fit. So you can see they're just, I'm not going to glue it. They're just going to slide right over it. And of course the tolerancing has to be pretty exact to do that. And then once I get these going, I'm going to speed up the video here so we can get to the next step. So that gives us all our large fragments. And one of the things that's really cool when you use clear coat, if anyone's ever painted miniatures, there's nothing worse than doing a really detailed job, or the best job you can do, and then you play with the miniature a couple of times, and on the highlights of the part or the figure, some of the paint starts wearing off, and it's just really a pain. So you always want to use a clear coat, and one of the things you have to watch out for with clear coat is that it's not going to react in a way that makes the colors something you don't want. So I have a lot of background in with making these replicas in testing the colors, and I use test parts, and of course then I actually paint one of these up, and it's not uncommon for me to change one of the colors because it just doesn't look right or something else, but everything's clear coated because I want the parts to be able to be handled. To me, a replica is, you know, I always want it to look really good, but if you can't just pick it up and enjoy it for a minute, then that's kind of a miss on the design, I think. Okay, so that gives us all of our small fragments. So you can see those are actually pretty easy to put together, and they're very consistent. So now those are ready to go. I'm not going to glue those or anything. The fragments will ultimately get glued on the body, and so regardless, the way they're fit together, you can see is so flush on the bottom. There's not going to be any movement in those parts as it is. Okay, so for my next step, I'm going to build up some of the other sub-assemblies. So a couple things really quick are I have these display stands that I like to use. I just think it really is a nice way to make the part pop. And if you don't have to use it, but if you do, I don't want it to necessarily be sitting on your desk. I do laser cut out these velvet pieces that I glue on the bottom. So, you know, what I don't want somebody to do is have this kind of scratchy edge, even though it's been finished. I don't want that touching a nice table or work surface. And so I have these velvet pads on the bottom of everything. And then I'm going to put the magnets in. So let's talk about magnets for a second. Magnets are huge. In this case, I'm going to use the magnet to help orient the grenade a little bit easier. You can see there's actually a feature on this where it's got just a little bit of an edge that's going to pick up on the actual base. But if you look at this for a second, you see there's that middle magnet. Let's talk about that. So that middle magnet is going to just fit right on there. And that way, even if you haven't handled a ton of these like I have, or handled the same one a bunch of times, you're going to be able to get it centered really quickly and know when you set it down it's correct. So the way I designed this is I knew I needed a battery. So I'm going to put the battery in the battery port, and I want it to be a really tight fit. So this is going to be a press fit. I don't necessarily need to glue it in, but I want that fit to be really tight. But it also has to be able to obviously accommodate the battery itself. And then I'm going to use these magnets just to hold this cover on. And so what's kind of cool about this is, you know, it's clearly on there and it looks seamless. And then if I want to get it off, I just rotate it a little bit, and then it becomes really easy to take off because I just rotate the magnets out of alignment with each other. Neodymium magnets, as people probably know, are really strong. And so we have that. There's another place that I use magnets in this particular build, and that comes to how the handle is on this design. It's kind of weird when you look at the pictures because they show a handle on the grenade, but in reality, anytime you go up to one of these grenades in the game, it looks just like this. The lid's completely cocked open, and it's there ready to work. And to the point of, even if you look at your character holding it, they're just going to hold it like this, and then, you know, they do the animation and stuff, but it's ready to go. So it's pretty clear when you look at the images that this is intended to close, and there is a model in the game that has it with the handle installed, as well as like the concept art from the designer. So I wanted to capture that, and I do it by putting this on magnetically. And this will have, you can see it's not painted there, but this is going to actually have this handle cover over it. These are two different colors, and that, again, that goes back to my rule about having separate colors. But the reason why I wanted this magnetically removed is the grenade looks nice with it attached, but there really isn't a way for this mechanism to logically come off. And that's something that really jumped out to me. Okay, so for my next step, I'm going to go ahead and build up the handle subassembly, as I showed you. So I'm just going to take a little bit of glue. I've already test fitted it, but I'm basically going to pick up on these inner surfaces here on this part. And this is a fairly viscous super glue that I'm using, so that's going to work really nice. And what I want to make really sure of is that there's two things. I want the screw holes to line up, and I don't want any of the glue to be visible. And frankly, super glue is pretty unforgiving. And when I can, I like to use fasteners because they're a little easier to work with. And this uses a really small Allen wrench. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and twist these in. And the glue is really going to hold the handle and handle cover together. But by using these, then I can get that. The screw, in this case, the screw is really here just for the cosmetic appearance. Again, when I talked about metal hardware earlier, I think it looks really good on any of these designs when you have the actual screws. It just makes it kind of pop. The other thing that hardware tends to do is it adds weight to the item. And because, you know, like let's say you're talking about the R99, you know, a submachine gun would weigh, I mean, I don't know, what, 6, 8, 9 pounds? And the R99 I make weighs about 2. So if I made it out of pure plastic, it would probably weigh a pound or less. But when you hold it, even at 2 pounds, it feels more weighty. So you can see there are some layer lines you can see here if you really look at it. That is what it is. I'm more interested in picking up the really sharp detail of the design. You've got this really nice grip texture up here. It is three-dimensional. It's molded that way, or modeled that way. And then I have the artwork on here, and I really like things like the artwork. I think really help make it pop as well, and I really like how that turned out. Okay, so the next subassembly I'm going to work on is I call this mechanism the fuse. I just end up naming everything because when I make engineering drawings of things, that's how I keep them straight anyway. So in this case, they have these positive and negative terminals. Really the key here is to make sure the orientation looks really crisp, and you want these to be in line with the center of the part. I actually have alignment features that I built into these. I don't know if you can see that, but there's just a little wedge on each side. If I was really concerned about installing them in the wrong side, I could make the alignment features different on each part. And that's a great way of error-proofing the assembly, but I didn't feel like it was necessary to do that in this case. So in this case, when you're looking at it with the trigger forward, positive is on the right, negative is on the left. And again, some little details on this. So again, if I want the fuse to really pop, look at these arrows. I think that looks really cool to have on there. And then I have the Apex logo, and I love how these turned out. I think they look really cool. It really makes it pop, and it looks nice with the finish of the part. These are a slightly different color. Sometimes I kind of wonder if I should make the color a bit more of a contrast, but I do like to have at least a subtle difference there. So then, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and get this flip top set up. So all I'm going to do is slide these two parts together, like that. Line up and they're fairly snug fit, and that's okay. That's what I want. What I don't want you to do is flip the grenade trigger cover up and have it flop down. I wanted it to, and this is kind of like the engineering side of it. You have to design the fit that you want for the parts. So I want it to rotate smoothly. And in this case, I'm just going to screw these in. You know, you could use a little, in theory, you could use a little super glue on the inner part, and then that would pick up on the threading of the screw. But there's also the risk that some of that super glue is going to come out. And I call it super glue. It's cyanoacrylate, or CA glue, for the UK folks, I guess. CA glue is great, but it unfortunately is really easy to have any kind of minor accident with, and then it leaves kind of a weird mark on your part. So I don't like that part. I like to have everything look really, really A-game. I know some people like things to look weathered. It is, I mean, I could make things look weathered. I just make everything look kind of factory issues by default. I kind of figure if there's as much going into the Apex games as they claim with all the betting and all the different planets watching it, that, you know, the reality is they're probably not just throwing the R99 on the ground for the next match. They're probably replacing that stuff pretty frequently, right? Because once you're using firearms, and I mean, is there somebody cleaning all those firearms between matches? I guess. I mean, obviously in the game they have wear marks on them, but in some fashion they're being serviced. So anyway, maybe I'm thinking too much about it. So again, this is going to be glued. If you're going to glue something, it's actually optimal to glue it to an unprimed surface. But the priming definitely isn't a deal breaker. So then if I check the fit on this, so again, laser etching to show the open mark, which I really like. And then I want to make that danger, in this case a decal, but I want the danger decal to really pop. And I make all my own decals. So what I do is I kind of look at what the artwork is, and then I actually, using computer tools, I generally use like Paint Shop Pro, but I actually redraw any of these decals, and then I just have to size them, and then I print them on vinyl and all that. So now that I have that, that's going to slide. You can see I made a indentation that's exactly going to fit this part. And I do that for alignment because I want it to be just right. And the other thing I like about this piece, by the way, is the pilot logo on the top. I think that's a really cool detail they added. So then I'm just going to do a quick test fit. You can see it's going to be great. It's going to be what I want anyway. Let's put it that way. So for this one, again, I'm going to use that higher I'm going to flip this open. And really the goal here is to get a good bond between the two parts, but I don't want any glue to seep beyond that. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to kind of thin down the application and spread it out some with this paper towel. Like that. Okay. Then I'm going to slide that right in there. Make sure I get my alignment just right. I'll see, I goofed it. Let's see. There it goes. I'm just going to check it. It looks really good. And it's going to rotate. And the other trick is going to be to make sure it rotates after it's dry. If it's not, then of course it's just a little bit stuck, and I'll fix that. But for now, that looks perfect. And I can just, if I set this way, because these are the same level, this is really the best position to dry in because the trigger cover isn't going to be, it's going to be resting on the work surface. Okay, so at this I'm in pretty good shape. Really, there's not a lot of assembly left. I got the sub-assemblies ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and get the trigger ready. So one of the things I really like is, if you listen to this, I don't know if the mic picks that up, but it has a really good engagement sound to it. Again, using like our completed one already. I just love that, because that's what I would want to hear, is like that, just a really crisp engagement sound. And so the way I designed this is, it's keyed on purpose because I want this to all go together a very specific way. So you can see there's a key slot in the back. When I say key, it's just a flat, but it's going to, and then the inner rim here is going to control the depth that this part goes in. So I will be very clear, this is very fine-tuned type stuff. So this is like, generally speaking, I design my parts plus or minus 0.005 of an inch. This is like plus or minus 0.02 of an inch type thing. Between, there's a small detent in the trigger, how the stack up of the parts works. It's got to be just right to get that really crisp feeling. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and install this trigger. There's really not anything special about this. I'm just going to tighten this guy up, and then I'm ultimately going to solder to the leg. This is just a standard single pull, single throw switch. And I'm going to go ahead and clock those parts just because I want them as far away from the perimeter ring as possible. And then select one other detail is when getting to the body here for a second. I tried originally doing this with a decal, for example, this really cool symbol they put on there, and it just didn't work out well. It just didn't look good enough. So what I ended up doing is modeling it's 0.010 of an inch deep, but there's a very slight feature modeled into the blank of the part. And then the reason that's there isn't really for anything other than very easily making it clear to me where I need a mask. So this is a part I paint in 2 colors. I go ahead and mask, the grayed off part first, paint this kind of yellowish tan color, and then I reverse the mask when I paint the green with it. And I do everything, I do all the painting with airbrush pretty much. So there's that. So anyways, the next thing I'm going to do is take my battery holder. And that's why there's 2 little holes in the bottom here. It's just for the wires. So I'm going to go ahead and stick these guys in here. And of course, whoever's buying this or using this would ultimately potentially need to be able to replace the battery. So I want that to be a very consistent experience and very doable. I am going to go ahead and put a little CA glue on the battery box, but I'll tell you that the press fit is really tight on purpose, because I never want somebody to pull out the battery box and get frustrated when they're trying to remove the battery. I just want the box to be completely immobile, and then your only focus is on the battery itself. So you can see that's good. I can hear it just really sitting there very snugly, which is exactly what I want. Make sure that one got in there. And that's it. So now we have that, and you can see I'm not going to have any problems with the cover. It's going to go on fine. So anyways, that's the battery part. Okay, so now I'm at the step where I'm going to go ahead and do all the wiring. So this is what one of the LEDs is going to look like once it's installed. Basically, I'm just going to take my LED and I'm going to put it into the insertion port, and I've got to feed it up through, and then I'm just going to tuck it in. And it's going to fit real snugly. So you see they don't move on their own, which is how I designed it. When I put the fragment over it, that'll be the finishing move. So basically what I want to do at this point is I want to put all my LEDs in. I want to connect them up. I'm going to solder in the switch, and I'm going to use the shrink tubing to protect the leads once they're soldered onto the switch. So let me go ahead and do all that, and then I'll come back. Okay, so coming back from finishing the electrical. So the first thing I want to do, obviously, is I'm going to get my battery in. I'm going to test to make sure all the LEDs light up, which they do. Then the next thing I'm going to do, you can see it's all kind of ready to go. I'm going to put the fragments on each individual port. But I'm also going to take these upholstery nails, and they're just going to be inserted into each of these ports. So I'll glue those in place. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back in a minute. Okay, so for this last step, I'm going to just finish up the top here. So I'm going to take the trigger and just slide it into the housing. I'm always going to test fit this part first, but if it works right, you can see it's doing exactly what it's supposed to. And so what's kind of cool is when I make these, remember this is the other one. So that's kind of the difference when you do this approach where you're painting things simplistically. I will glue this on, but they look very consistent whenever I produce things, they look very consistent when I make more than one. I think that's different than if you're doing a really detailed paint job, sometimes there'll be variability in the paint. So to finish up this offering, I'm going to put this kind of the whole thing together here. And, I'll put on the magnetic base. And then a couple other things that I like to include are, so I call this just a data plate. This is laser etched onto an aluminum blank that's been anodized black. But it's just a nice kind of a little display to put with the grenade. And then I always include a certificate of authenticity. So that's my logo laser etched on the front. And then on the back, you can see it says M20 Fragmentation Grenade and the creation date. So that's just a nice touch, I find. The last thing that I always do with anything that I make, for any of the finished products anyway, is I set up the box. So let me kind of show you this example here really quick. So I've got my logo on the front. I'm a big fan of magnet enclosure boxes when the size makes sense to do it. And then when I open it, you can see that, so this has been scored into the foam. Then I just pull up the lid, and you can see I've actually laser cut the foam to hold the grenade. So that's the way it's going to come. Not only does it make it really, really safe for shipping, but I just think the overall presentation looks really great. So I wanted to share that with you. I hope you enjoyed this video showing how I made a replica for the M20 Fragmentation Grenade from Apex Legends. I had a lot of fun with this project. It's the first of the replicas that I've actually put electronics in. Previously, everything's always been mechanical. So I really got something out of that. And I hope to expand further with future projects. If there's something you'd like to see, I'm always interested in kind of hearing what people are looking at or looking for. Please let me know. Otherwise, interested in reading any comments below the video. And don't forget to check us out at steelwolf-creations.com to see anything that we have available. Thanks, and have a good one.